This is the answer to the evaluation question number 4. How does your media product represent particular social groups? The way you represent a certain social group is very important when creating a product like this, because it needs to really appeal to your target audience so that they will want to buy the magazine. My front cover has very explicit representations of the rock and metal genres, because if it did not, then my target audience would not be interested in buying it. This is because it would not appeal to them and the ideologies they have about themselves. As I've explained in previous evaluation responses, I've used a very scribbly, messy and harsh typeface for my masthead. The reason I've done this is because it supports the ideology that fans of rock and metal music are a very tough and rebellious social group. This means that they'll be able to relate to the magazine because it represents them as they like to view themselves. The image on the front cover has great significance in the representation of the rock and metal genres of music that I wanted to create. Mise-en-scène is very important when creating representations with images. I used a red light to cast a shadow on one side of their face, leaving the other side neutral. The explicit representation with this is that fans of rock and metal are crazy, mad, and lead a dangerous lifestyle. However, leaving one side of the band members' faces neutral creates a representation that they have a calmer, friendlier side to them. I feel that my target audience will appreciate that I've slightly subverted the main representation of rock and metal music, because being a fan myself, I know that even though I like the tough, rebellious side of this genre, I also like people to know that it's not how I act in day-to-day life. Another way I've used mise-en-scène is in terms of clothing and facial expressions. I've made the band members wear clothes that are closely related to this genre of music, that connote the dark, rebellious stereotypes that are associated with rock and metal music. I've made them have stern expressions to create the same effect. I've done this so that my target audience will relate to the image and feel connection with it. I've angled the headline on the front cover so that it creates an implicit representation that my target audience are a rebellious and careless group of people. I have followed the stereotypical representation because it will attract my target audience into wanting to read the magazine. This is because they'll feel as if the creators of the magazine really know what type of social group they are. I've also used language that is associated with rock and metal music to strengthen this representation. I've used a swear word to show that this genre of music is very laid back and about rudeness and offensive language. The price that I've chosen reflects the social group that I'm trying to attract to my magazine. The common stereotype of rock and metal fans is that they are not the highest class citizens and possibly not the wealthiest of groups. Because of this, I chose a price that would be affordable on most people, or at least those that can afford to be going to many festivals throughout the year, which is a common convention with rock and metal fans. Another common stereotype of rock and metal fans is that they like to receive things for less than what they're worth. To conform to this stereotype, I've offered free posters and a free album download, so that my target audience feels as if they're getting more than the value of the magazine would entail. Compared to the front cover of the magazine, all of the stereotypes that I've conformed to or subverted from are very implicit. The reason I've done this is because I wanted the contents page to just be about the information being given, and not trying to force thoughts of representation into my readers' minds. The main part of this contents page is the images. What may not be obvious at first is that I have used a few implicit representations of the rock and metal genres of music. One of the main stereotypes of the rock and metal genres of music is that they're massively dominated by the male sex. As far back as my planning, I've stated that I wanted to break this stereotype, because it's clear that in these modern ages, the rock and metal music industry is not dominated by the male sex. To represent this, I've included a large image of a female artist that is the same size as an image of a male artist holding the same pose, playing the same instruments, and having the same power. This represents the broken stereotype well because it clearly shows that the male and female sexes are completely equal in this genre of music. This will appeal to my secondary target audience that is partially made up of females. I've used two images to carry on the representation of the slightly tougher, more rebellious social group that is associated with rock and metal music. I've used mise-en-scène in the first image to strengthen this representation by making the model wear a hoodie and have a crazy/angry expression on their face. The second image is focused on the language. The Glorious Dead strengthens the representation that some artists in the rock and metal genres of music are a harsh and dark social group. The last image that I've used to represent the social group of rock and metal fans is the image I've used for the editor. I've used an image where the editor has a stern, slightly crazy facial expression. He is also wearing an unbuttoned shirt that connotes that he is quite careless and rebellious. This will appeal to my target audience because these stereotypes are how they view themselves. Along with the editorial picture, I have also used the language in the text to represent the genre of music. I've used very colloquial language that is commonly associated with the age group of my primary target audience. The editorial uses words such as kick-ass content and popped into our offices. I've used this sort of language to connote that immediate fans of rock and metal are a laid-back group of people that are quite carefree. As I have stated in my research and planning, the audience members of rock and metal music may not be the most literate group of people. They especially do not like to read big blocks of text. To represent this, I have made my list of contents very simple and easy to navigate. I have not used complicated language and have kept the information down to the bare minimum. The image that I've used for this article is extremely important in the way that I've represented the social groups associated with rock and metal genres of music. One of the first things that you notice is that there is a black male in the band. I've done this because a common stereotype of music is that rock and metal is full of white people and black people belong in hip hop and rap. I've chosen to break this stereotype because I believe that anyone can be a member of any type of music because it's just a way of expressing yourself. I've used the positioning of the camera and mise-en-scène of the image as a way to create quite a confusing representation of the band. I've positioned the camera above the band to make it seem as if they are quite weak and vulnerable. On the other hand, they have very stern facial expressions and rebellious clothes that cancel out this previous representation. I've done this so that it makes my target audience start to think about how they are represented in society. To strengthen the rebellious representations, I've edited the image so that the shadows and blacks are very contrasted to the highlights and the whites. I've done this so that it seems as if they have two different personalities, one where they're calm and nice, and one where they're rebellious and tough. The image on the second page is quite important in how I've represented the rock and metal social group. I decreased the brightness of David to signify the darkness that could be associated with the rock and metal genre of music. However, I think that my primary audience will pick up on the fact that I've made the guitar brighter so that it stands out from the image. I've done this because rock and metal social groups view their instruments as being extremely important and having immense power when it comes to their music. I've also used mise-en-scène to strengthen this representation because I've made David position himself so that he is kneeling. This connotes that he is bowing down to the power of the guitar. In an article, the text is extremely important when representing certain stereotypes. One of the stereotypes of my target audience is that they're not extremely literate. To conform to this stereotype, I've used simple, colloquial language in the article. I've split it up into small sections so that it's easier for my target audience to read and make sense of. As I've said before, a prominent stereotype of rock and metal social groups is that they are very passionate about their music. To represent this, I've included content in the article that is based around the music that the band plays and where they get their inspiration from, instead of creating an article that just contained gossip. Lastly, I've represented that people in the rock and metal genres of music are very rebellious, careless, and laid back. I've done this by including a swear word in one of the answers to a question. This shows that the band does not care about being rude or using rude language.